And welcome back to Brampton Focus. My name is Michael A. Charbon with my guest today, Miss Maude Barlow. Now, she wrote this really cool book. It's called Boiling Point. And I'm going to read you just a little excerpt here of how they describe the book. And it's very important to listen because they believe that this book could be the most important book to Canadians for the year. And that says a lot about what's in this book and what it says. It says that we are complacent as Canadians. We bask in the idea that Canadians hold over 20% of the world's fresh water. Water crisis is something that faces many countries, but not ours. We're Canadian. Why would we? We have so much water. We could not be more wrong, as they would say. In Boiling Point, which is this best-selling book by Maude, she's an author. She's done like 18 books, is that Maude is an activist, and she lays bare the issues facing Canada's water reserves, including long outdated water laws, unmapped and unprotected groundwater reserves, agriculture, pollution, industry, all kinds of things. And when you look at certain segments of this book, you become alarmed. As a Canadian, I was alarmed. So we wanted to drill down a little bit on this. Maude, what possessed you to write this book? Were you just totally ticked off and wanted to expose what's going on from the industry and stealing from us? Or is it that activists that say we should all be aware of this, because if this can happen in Canada, this can happen somewhere else?
Well, it kind of started the other way, and that is I've done a lot of work internationally on the water crisis, but I found when I would come home and I'd say to Canadians, oh my God, you went like 22 countries in Africa are running out of water, and Brazil's got this drought they've never had in their history, they're dying, and I would come home and I'd tell people stuff and they'd say, oh, that's awful, but nothing to do with us. And I really felt that kind of complacency, that it doesn't touch us, is wrong. We have not taken care of our water. We allow all sorts of dreadful chemicals on our land and into our water. We have very sick waterways. I mean, the Great Lakes are in serious trouble. Lake Erie has got that algae back. So does Lake Winnipeg. Most of it's from the hog farms. We do know that there are no laws that protect or to stop the animal waste going into our water. Human waste, yes, we've got quite strict laws, but not animal waste. So it's really uneven. We have very few protections for our groundwater. We just have taken our water for granted. It's cavalier. So this is really, for me, a wake-up call, because we are living in a global situation where we are a planet running out of water. And if we think that we're somehow immune to that, or somehow it's not going to touch us, think again. There isn't anywhere on earth you could go.
I come back to the point that I asked you earlier. When you say we're running out of water, 80% of our planet is covered by salt water. And you made a statement that desalination, the cost and the after effect of the desalinated water is almost more adverse than trying to get into. There has been innovations that you've seen in Brazil and Peru, where they've taken the humidity of the current area, put it upside down in a tent, and are able to gather water that way. Is that the new frontier that we have to look at? It's
all the natural ways. We have to go back to what our great-grandparents knew, or what First Nations people know, which is nature's the best answer. So it's protecting watersheds, it's recovering watersheds. So it's recovering wetlands, it's recovering forests. I mean, if you cut down the wetlands and you cut down the forest, the water goes. You know why? Because the rain goes. Because if the rain doesn't have vegetation to fall on, the hydrologic cycle is interrupted. I got into this, Michael, from the human rights aspect, but I've had to teach myself the environmental and science aspect, and it's fascinating. And nature will come back if you just stop screwing it, and screwing with it. Nature will come back. There's a famous poet said there's a deep dearness down in nature. The earth will come back, but we need to stop poisoning it, and we need to start respecting it.
NAFTA is a huge piece that we're just in the process of negotiating. The United States has kind of cozied up to Canada and says you can do a side deal with us. The former president of Mexico, Vicente Fox, said Canada don't be made a fool of, and he actually pointed at Trudeau and said that. Many others have said NAFTA was the destruction of our middle class and has created the downturn because of cheap labor. When you take all that, how important is the discussion of water? Is it going to get lost in that negotiation?
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because it actually has gotten lost. And the reason is that in the first agreements, water was put in there as a tradable good. And that's what started me on this whole journey. Back in 1985, I was reading the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement, and I thought, how can water be a tradable good? I don't understand. And that set me on this path, right? It's still in there as a tradable good, and it needs to come out. So yes, water is to an extent getting lost. But the big issues that we're dealing with on NAFTA right now is exactly that, the destruction of the middle class, the destruction of the manufacturing base. And this is what people need to know. Back before the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement, sort of late 70s, manufacturing accounted for 26% of Canadian jobs. Do you know what it is now? It's under 11%. So we weren't allowed to keep those jobs here. We weren't allowed to say, well, to an American company, well, like the car companies, if you're going to sell here tariff-free, you have to create jobs here. That was a good trade agreement. See, I am for good free trade agreements.
No, I know.
But when they say, no, all of that's gone, and we're going to be able to move our production to the low-wage states in the United States or down to Mexico, and to hell with you guys.
Well, it's all gone to Mexico.
It's gone.
But if we want to face the fact is that automation and our demand for cheaper, quicker, faster.
It's true.
When you go into a fast service food emporium today, or in the United States, it's already proliferated throughout the whole. You punch in what you want. You take your card. You do your own exchange. Instead of having 8 people, there's only 2.
Where are all the parking attendants, and what's going to happen when all the
When's
trucks...
the last time someone opened up a travel agency?
I know.
As it moves, would you not say that the labor union, in a certain way, created this problem a little bit itself because it had such high demands?
You're absolutely right that the automation is a huge issue, and people's desire for cheaper products is a huge issue. But separately from that, we actually know specifically that about 30,000 jobs, just direct car manufacturing jobs, were lost directly to NAFTA. I mean, we can actually tabulate which are about automation and which actually are still being manufactured, but they're being manufactured somewhere else. So you're right that we're in a transition, and this is a difficult one for politicians. I mean, wait till you have cars and taxis and trucks driving themselves.
Well,
I mean,
look at what Tesla just announced. Would we not say? I hear this from politicians a lot. I'm fortunate to be engaged in discussions with politicians and politics. They constantly say, well, we have a highly educated workforce, particularly in the region of Peel. Highly educated workforce. These are the next generation of jobs. And these are the ones that are going to be able to conduct a society that will be based on those. We still need someone to do the rudimentary.
To make stuff. And that's the key thing about these trade agreements, is that you're not allowed to say secondary manufacturing has to stay here. You're not allowed to do that. You have to be able to send your raw materials off, and that's why we've gone back to cutting more trees and shipping out more fish and chopping up more minerals and sending it away, instead of saying what are the secondary jobs we can make here. And yes, automation will take some jobs away, but there's never going to be a total replacement for humans in making things and in producing things and producing food and cooking for food. Because at the same time there's the fast food restaurant that you talked about, there's also people wanting the slow food movement, and they want somebody to have grown good food. It is changing. And I guess what I'd like to see from our government is that they give us a chance with this trade agreement and other trade agreements, and they don't give away the right to protect the environment or to protect our natural resources to be used to create Canadian jobs and so on. Don't give that away. Most governments wouldn't give that away, and Canadians tend to say, when the Americans say jump, we tend to say,
well, they say when America sneezes, Canada catches a cold. So you've written 19 books. This is approximately your 19th book. You've probably ghostwritten a couple more that you don't want to admit to. How would you sum it up? Not only about the importance of what this book details to people about water, but about our current negotiations and where we're going. Being one of the founding members of the Council of Canadians, you've really seen the maturation of a Canadian in its own sense, one would say. what would you give our folks at home a direction to, in addition to picking
come
up
to
the
our
book?
website, learn about the Council of Canadians, Canadians.org, because we're terrific and we're nonpartisan, we're nonprofit. You can leave your politics at the door and come and work on these issues that matter to you. But we really have a moment here, and this is the good news, that people are really aware that there's changes. And I've lived long enough now, Michael, I've watched the women's movement change things. My mother was born the year the Canada Elections Act said no woman, idiot, lunatic, or child shall vote. I mean, so things change, right? Things can change, and I'd like to see Canada and I'd like to see our organization being really a deep part of the solution and putting forward the kind of trade agreements we want, the kind of protection for both the environment but also for job creation and so on. We understand the need for both, and I just think there's a particular moment now I feel actually quite excited about and energized by.
There was an excellent article on the book section in the Globe and Mail, and it's called Water, Water Everywhere. It's worthwhile to look it up because I know some people like to do research before they read a book. It talks about renewable resource. It talks about water refugees, and 7 billion, that's billion people are going to be in a water crisis. All boiled down, as one would say, in boiling point. With my guest, Maude Barlow. My name is Michael Charbon for Brampton Focus. Maude, first of all, thank you for bringing this to our attention and writing this book. We encourage you to pick it up, and we thank you for being with us and look forward to being with you again soon.